Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA targets for Friday, February 19th. It's a big 14-game slate after the All-Star break, so there's a lot of guys and a lot of options, a lot of different ways you can go. So let's call up the slideshow and talk about four guys who we really like for tonight. The four guys we really like for tonight are Stoudemire at 4,200, Nikola Vucevic at 7,300, Mike Conley at 6,500, and Danilo Gallinari at 6,900. So a lot of guys in that mid and lower tier price range that allow you a lot of flexibility to go up and pay up for a stud and fill out the rest of it with some value, or to go get a couple of those guys in the mid range and have a really balanced roster. The first guy we're going to talk about is Stoudemire at 4,200. He plays in a game with a 196 total. He is about an 8-point underdog against Atlanta, so it's not exactly the best spot to target for fantasy right off the bat. But you got Hassan Whiteside out on a 1-game suspension. You have Chris Bosh out with blood clots in his leg. And the Heat just traded Birdman a couple days ago at the trade deadline. So really there are no other big guys besides Stoudemire and probably Udonis Haslem, who are going to see a lot of minutes in this game. He's fresh off of a 5-game stretch about 2 weeks ago where he saw 25 minutes per game and put up an average of 26 fantasy points in each one of those games. With all the people that are going to be out in the front court today, I think this is another game where we see 25 to 30 minutes out of Stoudemire and, somewhere between 25 and 30 fantasy points. At 4,200, that's going to be a 6 to 7.5x value and could make him one of the top upside plays on the day. Definitely somebody at 4,200 who's going to be a popular salary saver if you're looking to fit in some of the high-priced studs. Next guy I'm going to talk about is Nikola Vucevic at 7,300. He's in a paced-up game against the Dallas Mavericks at 204, and Vucevic has been really good lately. In his last 2 games, he played 43 and 37 minutes, put up 28 and 20 fantasy points, had 13 rebounds in each game, 5 assists in one game, 6 assists in the other, and is chipping in about 2 defensive stats per game as well. So if you put all that together and you add it all up, this is a guy who's basically getting you just shy of like 50 fantasy points per game lately. He has 40 plus fantasy points, which is 6x his value or the upside that you need for a tournament in 8 of his last 16 games right now. So in 50% of the games he's played over the course of the last probably about 4 weeks, the last month or so, he's given you 6x value or better on his price tag, which means that this is a guy that's been helping you win tournaments pretty often, considering that he's hit that upside value at 50%. We like guys who are over 50% as safe, consistent plays that can get us their floor. This is a guy who's getting you a ceiling in half of his last 16 games. So that's a pretty big deal. At a price of only 7,300, I still think he's a little too cheap. And I think tonight might be another good night to roll him out there at low ownership. Next guy we're going to talk about is Mike Conley. Conley's in a paced-up game against the Minnesota Timberwolves at 204. And Marc Gasol is out. So that Conley's going to need to do more. They also just recently got rid of Jeff Green. So not only are you taking out Gasol, who has a high usage rate, but you're also taking out a high usage rate that Green had. Both of those guys were able to score some points, and a lot of the offense ran through either Gasol or some of the ISOs that they ran for Jeff Green over on the wing. So without those 2 guys in there, I think Mike Conley is going to see a big bump in his production overall. He's played 39 games already without Gasol over the last few seasons. In those games, he's averaging 17 points, 3 rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 defensive stats, which is good for about 35 fantasy points. He averaged 32 fantasy points over his last 5 games, even with Gasol in there. So I do think he has the upside to get you, 37, 38, 39 into the 40 fantasy point range today. And at 6,500, I think he's reasonably priced to do so in a paced-up game. The last guy we're going to talk about is Danilo Gallinari. This is a 217 total in his game against Sacramento. The pace of this game will be insanely high, and Sacramento has been killed by the high-usage players that go up against them recently. We saw guys like Joe Johnson, Thad Young, Brook Lopez put up big games. We saw, LeBron and Kyrie put up big games against them. Basically anybody who's considered a high-usage guy on the team that Sacramento goes up against usually puts up a lot of points because they see a lot of minutes. It's a high-scoring, high-paced game, a lot of missed shots, a lot of extra rebounds, a lot of extra assists to go around. And I think today it's Gallinari's turn. He's been averaging 20 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 defensive stats over his last 10 games. So this is a guy that can fill up the stat sheet. He can give you a little bit of contribution in every category. Some games he might have a big rebounding game and get 10. Other games he might be dishing off a lot of assists and have 5 or 6. Scores somewhere between like 16 and 30 something real life points every game, and he'll add a steal and a block in there for you as well. So he's been consistently getting you in the 35 fantasy point range, which is 5x value or safe cash game play for him at 6,900. And again, like I said, with the way Sacramento's been giving up points to everybody lately, this is a guy who also has the upside where he could put up a 45 or 50 fantasy point performance today. And I don't think anybody would think too much of it if he did. So that sums it up for the 4 guys who we really like and are going to be targeting here on Friday night. Like I said, the good thing about a night like this with 14 games, there's not going to be a lot of guys that are very highly owned. There's not going to be a lot of overlap. There's going to be a lot of different ways that people decide to try to take their lineups. And, that basically means to me is that this is a day where I don't have to be all that contrarian. I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick out the guys that I think are the most likely to get me, 5-6 times value, maybe even throw my cash game in a few more GPPs than I normally do today. I don't think stars and scrubs is the way to go. I think with all the options for value, you're going to see a lot of people trying to go the stars and scrubs route. And I think that opens it up for the winning roster being something that's pretty balanced. Could have a couple guys that you paid up a little more for and a, $4,000 player or 2 in there. But I don't think you need to go with like a $3,000 punt just to fit in a $10,000 player on a day like this. I think there's enough options that you can find somebody else who can get you the same kind of value. And there's enough options where you're going to be able to find another spot where you can pay up and use that extra money that you save. So that wraps it up for our DraftKings NBA targets video for Friday, February 19th. Thank you guys for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.